Summer has arrived and now is the time to get out your infrared filter. Now, I don't have a converted camera. The filter just goes on top of the lens. Darktable has all the tools you need to develop these files, whether it be in false color or in black and white. I'm Nicholas, and let's go. Now let's see how much elementary physics I can remember. I'm going to do this just to try and explain the two phenomenon you'll notice when you use infrared filters for the first time. The first one is that you need a tripod. You need a tripod because the exposure times become long. It's something like more or less like a 6-stop ND filter on top of the infrared bit. And the second thing is that when you take photos with an infrared filter, they all come out red. So here's some kind of explanation, and I hope I'm not getting this hopelessly wrong. Now, the radiation we get from the sun is mainly in this area between ultraviolet, the visible spectrum, and infrared. And we have about 50% of infrared, 50% visible, and a little bit of UV, which is still very important for our health. Now, in the visible spectrum, as you probably know, the lower wavelengths are the violets and blues, and then we go to the greens, yellows, oranges, and the higher wavelengths, the ones that are closer to the infrared, are the red colours. Now, what happens now, here I have a second chart which gives the colour of the sun, or the spectrum of the sun, depending on the wavelengths. Just to show you what is actually happening is that the infrareds are around here, get longer, so 750, 800, 850, 950 nanometers. Now, each color digital camera has an infrared cutoff filter, which removes the infrared from the light that reaches the sensor. An infrared cutoff filter will kind of let past, so it'll let past all of the visible light, and then at one point it will have a cutoff, and then it will let in a little bit of infrared, but very, very little, because apparently that deteriorates the quality of color photos. You have an infrared cutoff. It's a blocking filter. And what happens when you want to convert your camera to an infrared, then they actually remove this filter from the camera. The infrared filter you're buying that you put on, and now I have a higher 720 nanometers. 720 refers to the 720 nanometers here, which is in the higher reds. And this infrared filter will do the exact opposite of the infrared cutoff filter, and it will cut off all visible light before 720, and then it will let pass the light after. So here you have essentially the two explanations I have for the need of a tripod, or the need of a tripod. Look how much light is actually getting past. Nothing in the visible, not much in the infrared. And what I think is that the quality of an infrared filter is such that the visible light cut off by your infrared filter is blocking more than the infrared cutoff filter in the infrareds. So you're actually letting in a lot of infrared compared to the very little visible light. And that's what makes, for me, a good quality infrared filter. So it just shows that there's not much light going through, whether it's invisible infrared or visible color. That's why you need a tripod. And the second thing I was saying is the reds. Why are they red? Well, for me, they're red because somewhere in between the two filters here, there must be some red light getting through anyway. So there we are. Those are the explanations I have, and let's go on into Darktable. Here we are then in the light table with a bunch of infrared photos. You'll notice that some have been developed in false color, so these two, and some have been developed in black and white. These two, the others that are all red, notice that we have different shades of red. That depends on the camera, the lens, and the filter. Well, these are raw files that haven't been touched. and imported straight into Darktable. So let's have a look at this photo here, which was taken straight out my window. And so it's taken with a Fujifilm X100V, which is a fixed lens camera, 35mm equivalent, with an adapter, wide angle adapter, so it's a 28mm equivalent. Now, how do you start? Let's go into the pipeline here. This is the basic pipeline. I need to transform this to a Linear Rec 2020 because for some reason it keeps on going back to Rec 709, and for the moment we have just, so we're in a scene referred workflow. We just have the color calibration and filmic, which are standard. I haven't touched those at all, and I'm not going to touch much. We have two things to do. The first one is to find a color balance, and we're going to do that. We're going to select the color balance on some part of leaves, some grass, something which does photosynthesis. Why? Because when the plants make photosynthesis, they actually don't use infrared light. They actually reflect most of the infrared light, which is what we get in the camera. So that is why leaves are always very bright. So that is what we're going to choose to be a neutral color. That's what we have usually, is kind of very white or very bright leaves. So that's done. This photo doesn't look like much. And then I'll have a new instance of color calibration, which I'll call infrared. And here we have a preset that's made where you can swap the red and the blue channels. And swapping the red and blue channels will actually make your sky blue. It'll make the rest look red or not very good. You will notice straight away that I have a red vignette. Now that is due to the combination of lens and filter. It's not the same on all cameras, it's not the same on all lenses, and it's not the same on all filters. If the worst comes to the worst, some lenses don't work in infrared because you get a hot spot in the center, which it could be small, but it's kind of a brighter spot, and there's nothing you can do about that. You just need to change the lens. Here I have a problem, a color problem, where obviously red light has come through much more on the sides than in the center. So that is probably due to the lens as well, but I can try and sort myself out with that. It's workable. So that is what you get when you exchange the red and the blue channels on the color calibration. There are other ways to do this. There is another way to do it, and I made a preset for that, which will make things, I prefer this when instead of being red, the leaves become whitish yellow. Now I still have this yellow vignette around the edge. We can sort that out as well. Important thing you see is to get the white balance correctly on something that is green to start with, and you can try in different places and see what comes out best. I mean, there's no rule for this. Don't forget, we're not working with visible light. Any color we get is false color. Now, how did I get this? The recipe actually, well, let's go back to the beginning. We're actually using the color calibration as a channel mixer, pure channel mixer. So, I'm sorry, I reset the wrong one. This one here, the infrared. So no color adaptation, and we're just messing around with the red, green, and blue channels. So let's reset that. Now, in the initial state, we have 3 channels, and what we say is that in the red channel for each pixel, we're going to take the red information at 1, so that's 100%, and 0, 0 for blue and green. In the green, we take 100% of green, no red, no blue. And in blue, we take no red, no green, and we take 100% of blue. And when we want to swap the red and blue, what we say is we want that in the red pixels, we take 0 information from the red, and we take all the information from the blue, not 100, sorry, 1. The green we leave as it is, and in the blue, we take all the information from the blue, and from the red, sorry, and no information from the blue, and that swaps the channel. And what I did is I looked around on the internet, and then I made up my own recipe, which is just a recipe. because I'll say this again, this is all false color. The red I have 0, this should be 0 actually, 0, 0, 1, I don't need to normalize that. In the green I have 0.5 red, 0 green and 0.5 blue, and I don't need to normalize that. As long as the sum of these coefficients here is 1, you don't need to normalize. And in the blue, I took +1 for red and green and minus 0.5 in the blue. And this needs to be normalized because the sum isn't 1. So you'll see a difference if I click or I don't click. That was just to get the normalize. It's just so you don't have to work out this for the sum to be 1. So that's a recipe that works well for me. You can invent your own. As I say, this is false color. What I'd like to show you though is why it works. So to see why this works on an infrared photo, let's go to the standard model for additive color, which is 3 circles, one with pure green, one with blue, one with red, and with the addition of red and blue, which makes magenta. Red and green is yellow, green and blue is cyan, and red, green and blue together is white. That's the additive model of color. When I exchange the channels, so I'll swap red and blue, what happens here, you see, is that what was red becomes blue, what was blue becomes red, but what was magenta stays magenta, what was green stays green, because it's in the center. It's like a symmetry, like if we were folding along this line here, and the yellow and the cyan will exchange. And now, why does it work on infrared? It just works because in photography, for our eyes, the sky is blue. And if the sky is a different color, our brains say, no, 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 this doesn't work. So we're just looking for a method to make the sky blue, whatever the colors of everything else. Now, the sky is red, everything's red, because it's an infrared photo. Look at these here, the sky is red. So what we're doing is we're making the sky blue. The foliage, and other parts of the image might be desaturated, so have less colors, so we'll be less affected by this color swap because they'll be more in the central region of the of saturation. So that is why it works. And in the recipe I did, color calibration infrared 2, it actually swaps while making a lot more yellows. So the reds that were here become a kind of blue, a lighter blue, and what was red becomes a lot more yellow. So that is another way to do it. But as I said, that is my recipe, inspired by things I found on the internet. Make up your own, and it's no problem. There is another method of swapping red and blue, which works very well. Now let's remove this color calibration here. Let's reset that to its initial state. This is a TIFF file, it's not a raw file, which explains why we don't have filmic up there. And let's take the color balance RGB. Now you've just seen, actually it was already on. So this is the original. And instead of swapping, what we could do is rotate the colors. So we just turn this thing around. And color balance RGB has a hue shift in degrees. Now what I suggest is that we do 180 degrees. So that's a half turn. So what was red becomes blue. Well, it's a lighter blue, it's a cyan. What was blue becomes yellow, because this is a yellow. Because the hue shift will shift the hues but not change the luminance. And if you don't believe me that this is a yellow, then let's go to exposure. And if we bump up the exposure, then you'll see that this is actually yellow. And you might see that what we have in the darker tones, so we have a nice green in the center. This shade here is a kind of purpley blue, and it's not a gray, and this is a cyan. And it actually works well, I find at least, for infrared photos. So let's have a look, go back to our original photo and see what it does. So let's go back, double click on that one. And so I'm going to remove this color calibration infrared. I'll get the whole pipeline there so you can see what I'm doing. I'll delete that. So now the channel swap has gone. and I'll go into the color balance RGB tool and shift up the hue 180 degrees. Now, the infrared photos lack often in contrast, a little bit of sharpness, so there's always work to do. Notice the sky is blue though. So what I often do is I use the brilliance sliders on this. I can use a tone equalizer as well, but I really like what the brilliance does on these photos. I think it brings them to life quite a lot. So I have a blue sky, I have white foliage, I have this yellow mess around the end. I can actually sort of get rid of that. It would be better if I changed the, well, if I did it with a different camera, but you do it with what you've got. Let's try and get rid of those yellows quickly. I'm going to do a targeted mask on these yellows. Now, making masks with an infrared photo is more difficult than with a color photo. Now, why is that? Because if I look at the hues, let's press on C here, then there's not much difference in hues because we're capturing infrared. I mean, there's not much color information there. What we can see though in chroma, we will see those yellows are the pixels with the most chroma. So I'll be able to get those, do this quickly. If I slide back, I have kind of everything except for kind of a little hot spot in the center there. Sort of a bit of a feather radius. Okay, and let's remove the chroma on that. I can actually make -100. That should work. Global saturation, kind of get everything down. I don't want to touch the brilliance too much because that will darken the photo. If I touch brilliance, and I'll darken the pixels. I don't want to do that. So I'm not touching brilliance here. I shouldn't really touch saturation, but with Darktable 4, and we're here in the Darktable UCS 2022 color space, saturation doesn't lighten or darken the colors that much, well, less than before. So I can work on that. I could make several masks, but if you see the difference, then there is a difference, and I can live with those yellows there. And so that is one way of making a false color infrared using the color balance RGB. Now to finish, and because I don't really want to make this video that long, now you have the recipes, some ideas to start editing. I can show you one false color infrared photo. So this was made with the GFX with so it says 35 millimeters, but it's not a 35 millimeter lens. Actually, it's a 50 millimeter. Now that's strange. Never mind. It was with a 50 millimeter lens because that's the only one I have. So what did I do for this photo? So I managed to get nice blue sky. I've kept the reddish tones just to show exactly what happened, because you can't expect an infrared photo to kind of pop its colors straight away. There's always a bit of work to do. So color calibration, I did kind of the white balance on the grass, I think down here. The infrared is done with a simple swap, you see, between red and blue channels, and all the rest is working on masks. So I masked the ground to try and work the color balance on that. I've masked the sky to try and pop the colors with the tone equalizer, and here I can't click on that because it's a raster mask, but the same one with the sky to get the colors, and then diffuse or sharpen to try and get a bit of detail back. But really, if you want to work on an infrared photo in false colors, I don't think you're going to be able to do it without masking, and well, obviously that will take a little bit of time. Let's have a look then how to make a monochrome black and white infrared photo. Now, back in the light table. So here I already had one. I've duplicated this raw file and I've reset the history. Now, if you notice, I just remembered that I could put a red circle around the cursor. I don't know if it's better, if it's easier for you, but why am I in softproof? Well, I've got the app, so I thought I might as well use it. Let's go quickly then. So Command B will bring up the, what's it called, the ISO, or I can't remember what, anyway, the white frame, which will help me choose the exposure, get something kind of nice going on. Command B again to get rid of that. Now in the color calibration, I want to open that and choose the white. Let's choose something white. Let's choose that temporarily. And I'm going to go into color balance RGB and shift the hue. And usually I'll start with this, boost up the highlights and the mid-tones. Now it's sorely lacking in sharpness. Looks a bit hazy and soft. And I've also got some highlights there that have gone. So let's try and get those a little bit back with Filmic. I don't think I've lost much there. Let's check the clipping on the sensor, but there doesn't seem to be any. I can use the tone equalizer. Let's set the masking back to normal. I've only got a very small line there. I can try and bring down, there we are, just to get some details in the highlights there. Now, as a false color, I'd like a blue sky. I have lots of yellow. I have a little bit of blue peeking through here. You can do some work on the color in the color balance RGB if you want to use the 4 ways. Now, what I understand is that if you want to use the power, the luminance on the power, you need to set the white fulcrum automatically, so we don't get any false darkening of bright areas. Now you can target areas. So if I want to target, let's say in the shadows, I'm going to target an area here, make a square there, and it's targeted the hue here, 76.08. And I'm going to do 76 plus 180. I'm going to rotate that 180 degrees. And if I add chroma, then I am actually making that more neutral. So I'm adding blue to the yellow. And that is something you can work around with. It's kind of one of the ideas or the recipes you can have if you want your false color to look, well, if you're working, trying to get some nice colors and you have bright areas, then you can work on that. If I work on the power here, let's see, and I try and get the chroma here. Now nothing's going to be very far from, I was at 76, nothing's going to be very far, to be honest. I was 81 plus 180. I'll try and remove, you see it's removing a little bit everywhere there. That's because I'm in the power. So I was working on this photo, trying to adjust hues individually, not really managing to do it. And I thought, okay, let's get this into monochrome. So to get monochrome, I use the color calibration, new instance, right click, black and white. And usually I don't do much. I just go to the presets and use I often use the first one. So there I am in black and white. Now, just something, if you've been working on the colors, especially on the lightness, if you've been working on the saturations, then this black and white, if it's before, it will neutralize, or the color balance RGB won't be able to work properly because color calibration came before. So Control Shift, and usually what I do when I do a black and white photo is I would push the calibration black and white just before Filmic, so that all the editing I do on colors is on a color photo and it's turned into black and white after all the work on the colors. Usually, well, I could leave it like that. I could, sorry, did I just hit the microphone there? Sorry about that. Diffuse or sharpen, we could dehaze that, and I think we'll be fine to go with a standard dehaze. Is it working? There we are. And we have a black and white infrared. So I can show you, if I take a snapshot, go back into the history, you can compress the history stack. And if I go to this state here, which was before doing all the work on the RGB, then I have the difference, how you can bring out some textures, the lights, all the details in the trunk, the white leaves, how you bring everything out in a black and white infrared photo. Well, so that's it for this video then. I encourage you to try this because it is really fun, and enjoy yourselves with black and white or with false color infrared photos. Okay, see you later then for another video. So a quick postscriptum on this video just about filters. So all infrared filters are not made equal. The Hoya filter I have, which is a 720 nanometers, is very good. It works fine. Don't know if it's the best one, but it works fine. I did buy one which is from Amazon, which is the Earth brand, URTH, which is supposed to be high quality glass, and I cannot make it work. For example, if you see on the photos, you see I do have some bright red photos here, and those are with this Earth filter, and I think it lets in far too much red light. So what I did, I made myself a preset, a style if you like, so I can access that with infrared here. Now the infrared style, what does it do? It just does two things. It gives me color calibration infrared, so it swaps the channels, and that's about it. And the color calibration, we just choose a place to put it. Something very quick to do as a style, and it works. That gives you a starting point. Now if I go to these, let's try this one here, done with the Earth filter, which you can see is very, very red, lots of red there. And if I apply the style, now maybe it's because I'm ignorant, but there is something really strange with this. I just can't make it work. Whatever I do, I just get a mess. And get the white balance there, infrared is there. If I reset that, remove it, and try by shifting the hues, then honestly I can't get much out of them. So maybe it's me, maybe not, but I do recommend the Hoya filters over the other brands, just because, well, that's what I've tried and that works. There we are. This is the real end of the video. See you later.